All right, so welcome to today's show, the Five Stones Podcast. It is September the 11th, and I thought maybe we'd do, or actually Joe thought maybe we should do kind of a remembrance show as to where we actually were.
22 years ago now.
Were you born?
Yeah, not that young, but yes. Yeah.
What were you doing?
I was actually driving to campus at Butler University, and I was listening to Bob and Tom. That was my morning ritual. And if you're not from Indiana, morning show here in town on the radio. And they made mention, hey, there's a plane that went into a building in New York. We don't think it's a big deal yet. And they start going on, oh, it's some guy in a Cessna, whatever. And by the time I got to campus, about a 20-minute drive, it was pretty apparent that it was a lot more than some guy in a Cessna making a mistake. And I walked in to my professor's office, and he had a TV on, and I sat down just in enough time to see the second plane hit the second tower. And I think I spent the next 3 hours just sitting there, jaw dropped, thinking, how can this happen to us? It was a sobering event, to say the least.
So I was in the corporate world at the time, and I was sitting in Detroit, Michigan in a conference, and somebody came in and said an airplane just hit one of the towers. And I remember thinking I was kind of waiting for the punchline of the joke.
Yeah.
And then they rolled in a TV in time to see the second one. And an offshoot of that thought makes me always wonder about when you read history, different people's history, where they were when certain things happened. And it's just funny where you were and where I was, and we can pinpoint the exact same time.
Yeah.
You were sitting in Butler campus. I was sitting in Detroit watching the second tower, and they immediately canceled the conference. And I had ridden up with another guy from the Indy area, and he immediately said, oh, we need to go get gas.
Yep.
And he went out and got gas, and it was like $7. It had already jumped to like $7 a gallon. And he had a big Suburban that he filled up. I think later the Detroit State Attorney General sued some of those gas companies for price gouging. So I was in Detroit.
I was working for I think it was Bank One, or maybe Chase had just purchased Bank One, somewhere around there. Working in the branch in the management training program, and I remember hearing murmurs, oh, a plane crashed, and we were all just thinking, no, that's a bad accident for somebody to go off course and not see a building. And then we rolled the TV out, and then they started to comment about people jumping off the building, and the second plane kind of, if I remember, you're kind of watching the news and you thought you saw it in the background.
Yeah.
And they're like, was that what? And that was when panic started to set in. And that second one hit, and then we watched, and then when the buildings collapsed was another surprise, which...
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast just last week, and I listened to a podcast called Business Wars, and they are not a sponsor, so I'm not promoting them, but they take two businesses, and then they talk about their history and how they were battling each other, and the one I listened to last week was Hilton versus Marriott. Mm-hmm. And it's usually a 6 podcast episode through there. One of the episodes they talked about the tragedy of the Marriott was sitting at the foot. There's a Marriott hotel that was sitting at the foot of one of the towers, and when that tower collapsed, it collapsed on the Marriott and only killed 2 people. They managed to get, when the first tower got hit, the Marriott people got all the guests out of the hotel except the manager and one of the maintenance men were checking the upper floors to make sure there were no more people. And when the second tower fell on the Marriott, it crushed that entire hotel and those two people in the hotel. So, so there's just all of the after effect and how has it changed businesses. I know, like in the corporate world where I was, it didn't really affect the business of my corporation. Mm-hmm. How did it?
Well, banking continued on. I recall that there was a lot of initial panic, and there were people talking. They closed the branch maybe for a day or two. I think we closed down that day and were sent home to be with our families or whatever. But I remember even a year later, I was working in Chicago on the anniversary, and Jamie Dimon came out and spoke. They have a Chase Tower there, and there was a lot of concern that on the anniversary would be more of attacks,
Yeah.
So everybody was, should we fly that day? Is that an important day for some reason? And so it was a year later. It was still.
I honestly don't remember what I think the next day I was at home because they canceled the conference.
I think I left campus and went back home, and I think I stayed back. I don't think I went back to campus that week. I think everyone was it was almost shell shock. Like, I wasn't scared to go outside and live life, but I think I was busy looking at so many things, wondering, what's that person doing? What's this, just so hyper sensitive to anything unusual.
I do remember there was a guy that was my peer. I had the Eastern United States, and a guy by the name of Dino Anderson was my equal in the Western United States. His flight was canceled out of Detroit that night, obviously, and he talked about renting a car and was going to drive back to San Francisco from Detroit. He had to drive back. Have you guys seen the FAA map of air traffic?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I've seen.
Yeah, it's
shocking
like
how many
zero.
Yeah.
Within 30 minutes or 26 minutes, all the planes had been grounded in the United States. And there's a map. If you look it up, you can Google it. It shows, all the air traffic, and you can see the red dots. And then like 10 minutes later, and then by 26 minutes, there's no airplane anywhere in the United States that's in the air.
I recall the stories where there were scrambled fighter jets to shoot planes down.
Well,
yeah.
Well, especially once the third plane went into the Pentagon, and then they had the other one that went down in Pennsylvania, the fourth one. I mean, by the time all of that was going on, you bet your life that any Air Force, anything that the country could do to get those up, they were up.
Things that are probably not directly attributed, but have affected businesses like the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, just think of getting on an
think about
airplane
flying.
now.
Yeah, with the.
Well, I mean, here we
TSA
are
and all
22 years later, and we're still seeing the results.
taking their shoes off and getting
Belts
scanned.
off and all of that stuff. That I remember when I was in the corporate world before that happened. I lived in St. Louis. I could schedule an air flight at 8:30 and leave my house at 7:45 and still make the airplane because you literally just walked on.
Yeah.
St. Louis is not that big. I could hand carry my 4 days of clothes and just walk on the airplane. And now it's like, you got to be there 4 hours early.
And you could walk freely through a terminal. Like if you wanted to go pick someone up from the airport, you could go in, walk all the way up to the gate, collect them, and then leave. That doesn't happen anymore either.
Yeah. So there are still a whole bunch of residual outcomes from that. And like I said, the Patriot Act, a lot of banking stuff was probably instilled.
Well, the OFAC stuff got a little more serious at that point. They found those guys were wiring money to take airplane courses and stuff like that. I'm sure it affected a number of industries in little ways we don't know. It takes years usually to react by the government.
Well, it's been now so long, it's almost hard to think about. I was not a small business owner 22 years ago. we owned rentals. So I mean, I most of the stuff I've cut my teeth on in the last 22 years have come since then. So I can't really talk about what it did to small businesses.
Personally, I remember having a lot of questions about Christian beliefs when I was watching people jump off the building, and I had some misconceptions about, suicide and things like that, and I had to have some self-reflection about some of that stuff. So it was good in that way for me to open up my mind a little bit to.
I remember George Bush standing in the rubble, talking with people. Our elected officials actually united for a fraction of time, standing on the the stairs going up to the Capitol, singing.
You, and soon everybody that did this is going to hear you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was
a uniting time for this country.
Well, one of the things I get mad at all the time is, you hear the story of Bush was reading a book to children, and when they gave him the news, he just finished reading the book, and they're like, "Oh, what did he do?" And that always irritates me at that level, because I mean, you equate that to being like the CEO of a company, and the couple things: the CEO should never show being rattled,
right,
and B, at that point in time, there was nothing George Bush was going to do sitting in the White House that he couldn't have done from right there. I'm sure he told everybody, round everybody up, get reports, do this, and I'm going to finish this book for 10 minutes to these children, and then I'll be there.
It's not like at that point there wasn't preventative measures that could be taken. It was done.
Yeah, there was nothing he was going to do. So I get upset when people, especially the left, likes to say, well, Bush just finished. Yeah, that's the sign of a good leader.
Well,
he delegated what he was supposed to do, finished the task at hand, didn't become rattled, didn't fall apart.
It didn't rattle a room full of children.
Yeah, and then did what he had to do.
The context of the moment, there was still so much mystery about what exactly was happening too. So he didn't know if, I don't like that. He didn't react properly, or he didn't do this.
Well, I mean, I'm the CEO of several companies, and Joe knows this. There's a lot of fires that happen that I don't immediately jump into. I know about them, I'm aware of them, and we talk to other people about, hey, how to get this done, have you got a plan to fix that? But I don't jump in and handle actual, and I hate to say day-to-day activities, because that wasn't a normal day.
Yeah.
But you don't micromanage the CIA or anybody like that.
Well, then how many other problems do you create by trying to fix one when you jump into it
if you don't
in
know
an emotional capacity as opposed to using your intellect?
That's actually a good point. Maybe that's the key of this whole podcast today, is to take that and think about that as the leader of a CEO of a small business. Joe brought up a very good point. You can't knee-jerk react, because if you do, you take the chance of either A, complicating what's going on, or B, going in the wrong direction. But if you've built your company correctly, i.e., you've got a director of the CIA, you got a director of the FBI, you put those people in place for a reason, and that was the extreme example of why you would put someone in that place. If something goes wrong with our payroll, I don't immediately go to the bank account and start paying people. I go to the head of the payroll department and go, hey, what's going on? Have you found the problem? Can we fix the problem? How do we stop the problem? But I don't immediately jump in and start going to the bank account and writing checks.
The whole point in having those people in place is for them to be able to work on what they work on and bring it to you, so that you have the ability to make the best decision with the information brought to you. And in that case, there was no information to even bring to him. It was, how are we going to, how do we
somebody
survive
hit
this?
the tower, what now?
Yeah.
I don't know. Was it an accident? Was it on purpose? Who did it? Why'd they do it? All that, like I said, all that he wasn't going to learn in the next 10 minutes.
No.
When he finished doing what he was.
But if he threw his papers up and ran out of the room, everybody would be in
Yeah.
worst state of mind.
Well, and then what does it show the rest of the world? The leader of the free world is in a panic?
Yeah.
You can't do that either.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things they talk about all the time with any CEO when they look at him. I mean, most of your big names, at some point, somebody has said, well, they acted calmly or they acted rationally or they didn't panic. And it's not that I don't think they did. I think that they're just really good at controlling themselves and reserving for that outward appearance. So, like I said, the worst thing in the world it could have been would have been having the president of the United States flying around, trying to catch his tail, and everybody else would have went, "What's going on over there?"
Yep.
Start shooting down commercial airlines.
Yeah.
Some emotional reaction. Well, when a problem arises, sometimes you do need to take a minute and realize, hey, and just maybe I don't know what to do, but I know who or what who I need to talk to, who I've hired to do this job.
Yeah, and that's why you put people, and that might be one of the downsides that we've kind of talked about it when you get those solopreneurs that do everything. Yeah, they might panic because they're panicking as the head of payroll or the head of compliance. As the CEO, they should not be panicking yet, at least outwardly, because that's what those people are in place for. I mean, you hire people to do what they do. And with Joe and I, there's been a lot of things where people have called and I'm like, you need to talk to Joe. Joe's the director of program development, not me.
Two heads are better than one sometimes.
Yeah.
But
So-
you do need a leader to make choices.
Well, ultimately, someone has to make choices, but you have to have people in place that are capable of doing their job so that the person that's going to make the final decision has all of the information so that they can make a rational final decision.
Yeah. And that's where most of your issues end up with when you get a bad intelligence to the CEO who makes a bad choice. Some of the times it's not that it was a bad choice, it was bad data or wrong data. And there have been plenty of things that you can point to where people have made a decision and then down the road bit them in the ass and they're like, well, it's because I did it based on X. What we didn't know was Y, and that popped up. So,
Well, to round it back out, what we do know is on that day we did finally get a good reminder of what this country can be when we're all united. Unfortunately, it took a tragedy of that caliber to get us united, and it didn't keep us united as long as we would have liked. But for a moment in time, no one cared about Republican, Democrat, liberal. No one was worried about any of these other social issues right now that in the grand scheme of things are not that important. We were united as a country and we were going to protect our own no matter what we had to do. And that part of things was a very,
It was good to see.
that was the good part
Yeah.
out of that tragedy, to see us have that ability and know that we still have that in this country.
yeah.
We had Gulf Wars in reaction to that, but we really haven't been at war like generations prior.
Yeah.
That's
No.
kind of our defining event.
I don't think
For our
my personal opinion, I don't think we'll ever see another war like 1 or 2.
I agree.
I think we're now too tied into each other. I'm not saying there won't be an economic battle or a technological war. And that's where I think most of the stuff is happening now. It's almost what I equate to in the military. Being prior military, people are always talking about nuclear weapons. And I kept saying, no, I'm more worried about biological weapons. When we were in the military, they introduced us to some of the stuff that we had. And we used to carry atropine and for that kind of stuff. That stuff scares me more because there's too much fallout from a nuclear bomb that would potentially hurt themselves.
You drop a nuke, there's no value in what you've done.
Yeah, the same thing now is I don't think there's too much, hand-to-hand, man-to-man war like World War II with foxholes that I don't think we'll see. I think it's now all going to be hacking and economic and sanctions, and that's how we were going to do the next war. You know, we're going to hack somebody's computer and take all their stuff and crash their economy. That's how it's going to be done.
And that hurts everybody,
Yeah.
almost everybody.
Well, which is why people can't wrap their mind around what's going on in the Ukraine.
I think it's interesting that they're at war and politicians from here are flying there into the Capitol. It's so dangerous that, you know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
going in there. It's hard to imagine. It's war, not war like what we imagine on the movies.
Well, that's what I said. It's not. There
Generations.
isn't
It's
not
different.
going to be. I don't think the U.S. is going to be involved in a trench warfare with foxholes like
No.
storming of D-Day and Normandy.
But to your point, though, you got to remember it's like flying into Indiana while someone's fighting a war in Alabama. Are you really that close to what's actually happening?
I don't know where Kiev is or whatever it's called now. Kiev. It's always.
I don't know where Alabama is.
I do.
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, the worst city in the world. Feel free if you're at home taking notes to go ahead and write this down. Is Birmingham, Alabama, is the absolute worst city in the United States. And unfortunately, where's your wife at right now?
She's there.
She's in Birmingham,
For
and
work.
she is probably confirming my thoughts. Is she not?
Well, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Well, followed closely by trying to drive through Atlanta.
Well, that's a whole separate story. Driving through Alabama is not bad. The best view of Birmingham is in the
Rearview mirror on the way out.
because it is a terrible city. And if you're watching this in Birmingham,
You know it's true.
sorry. So today I would like to, take some time for you guys in remembrance of the
Yes.
22nd anniversary of the September 11th attacks. So thank all the people, the firefighters I know we heard the fire department over here, I think, sound their alarms at the time.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Take some time if you have some kids that are of age to understand it now that we're obviously not alive at that point. Take some time and explain to them what was going on. It's important that they get history from people that actually lived through history and not always just from a book. Talk with them, explain to them what life was like.
Keep an eye on how your school presents it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
One other thing, just while we're here, since we're kind of on this topic, the other thing that can pull us all together. Where were you at the OJ trials? The OJ Simpson trial. I remember I was in grad school, so you may not.
I was that was 94. I was in 8th grade.
Yeah, I remember going into grad school in the parking garage, and they said, "Oh, they're back with the
Yep.
answers." And I sat in the garage for the hour and listened to the radio. Didn't even go to class. I'm not even sure if the class was there because I pulled in, parked in the garage, and sat there for an hour just listening to the radio. Then backed out and went home.
Yeah, I remember more in my mind the OJ running away in his white Bronco. I think they preempted basketball or something that night to show it, and I was mad that I couldn't watch. Who cares? Why is this guy why do I care?
Yeah.
That's all I could think at that point.
I remember thinking he's going 25 miles an hour. Just pull him over.
Yeah.
How many times have we seen a pit move, but we don't do it 25 miles an hour?
And there was like 50 cop cars behind him. I remember thinking that.
We're going to escort him out of the state. We don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
I was
Leave.
at school in Bloomington at the time, but if I recall, I couldn't have cared less about that.
Yeah, at that time it didn't really register. I don't think and nowhere am I putting it even closely on the scale of the September 11th. But it was just another one of those times where my parents talked about, oh, where were you when Kennedy was shot?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, see, I was here, but I was 3 days old.
My parents were in school at that
Yeah.
time.
My dad had chomped down on an ink pen and swallowed ink and went to the nurse and was convinced he was dying because he drank ink. So they went ahead and let him walk home. And from the time he walked out of the school and walked in the door at home, in that time frame is when JFK was assassinated.
I was 3 days old, so I don't remember it, but my mom tells me the story.
I remember my grandparents talking about Pearl Harbor. So to me, Pearl Harbor is probably as close to what we dealt with in September 11th as what
Now,
this country
ironically,
has seen.
when I was 3 days old when Kennedy was killed, I was in Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Because that's where I was born, in Honolulu. So, if you've got any questions about business, feel free to email us.
Please do.
Or put something in the comments. Remember to hit the subscribe and link button or like button.
Right below.
We try and put something out every week for small business people, specifically in the real estate, mortgage, financing kind of world. But a lot of this can be applied to, any small business person. So
Just felt like today was the right time to talk about something like this. It's an important day.
So what are you smoking today?
I'm smoking a New World.
I've got a New World.
I've got a Bella Artez, I think it's called.
Yeah.
It's good. It's kind of it's box press, kind of a Padron-ish type of cigar.
I keep saying I'm going to smoke something else, and I had a La Flor Dominica at home the other night.
It's just tough to switch.
Yeah, because it's like switching coffees. You get used to one brand, then you switch to taste another brand. That other brand's probably just as good, but you're always going, well, it doesn't taste like what I'm used to. And that's how I felt with that LFD. It was good LFD, but it wasn't my normal cigar.
Well, final plug of the day. Currently, we are sitting in the grandeur of the Cigar Club of Indiana. If you are in a donut county of Indianapolis, you got to come check us out here at some point. Go to cigarclubofindiana.com. You get yourself a day pass, come in, check things out. Yesterday was a busy day here with football and bourbon and cigars. Just a great place to come hang out and
Today we're
chat.
all sitting here working on our laptops.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good for the professional environment. If you want to come in, we've got 3 separate Wi-Fis so nobody gets bogged down. And allows you to enjoy a cigar while you're working in a professional environment during the day.
Yep.
All right. See you later.
Adios and harumph.
Harumph.